Mark bakes a chocolate cake. Mark is a young man who lives in a small town called Sunnyvale. He is 30 years old and works as a teacher at the local elementary school. Mark enjoys teaching children and finds joy in seeing them learn new things. He lives alone in a cozy little house with a garden full of flowers. One Saturday morning, Mark wakes up to the sound of birds singing outside his window. The sun is shining brightly, and the sky is a clear blue. He stretches his arms and takes a deep breath. Today feels like a great day, he says to himself. He gets out of bed and walks to the kitchen to make breakfast. He decides to have toast with butter and a cup of coffee. As he eats, he thinks about what he wants to do with his day. I haven't baked anything in a long time, he thinks. Maybe I should bake a chocolate cake. Mark loves baking. It is one of his favorite hobbies. He enjoys the process of mixing ingredients and creating something delicious. He especially loves chocolate cake because it reminds him of his childhood when his mother used to bake it for special occasions. Excited about the idea, Mark decides to bake a chocolate cake today. But first, I need to check if I have all the ingredients, he says. He finishes his breakfast and cleans up the dishes. Then, he goes to the pantry to see what ingredients he has. He takes out a piece of paper and writes down the ingredients for a chocolate cake. Flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, eggs, milk, vegetable oil, vanilla extract. He checks his pantry and refrigerator. Let's see, he says, looking through his supplies. I have flour, sugar, and salt. I also have baking powder and baking soda. I have eggs and milk. Oh no, I'm out of cocoa powder and vegetable oil. He realizes he needs to go to the store to buy the missing ingredients. I need cocoa powder, vegetable oil, and vanilla extract, he notes. Maybe I'll buy some frosting too. Mark gets dressed. He puts on a comfortable pair of jeans and a blue shirt. He slips on his shoes and grabs his wallet and keys. Before leaving, he waters his plants in the garden. Don't want you getting thirsty while I'm gone, he tells the flowers. He locks the door and walks to the grocery store, which is just a few blocks away. The weather is pleasant, and he enjoys the short walk. He sees neighbors working in their yards and waves to them. Good morning, Mark. Mrs. Smith calls from her porch. Good morning, Mrs. Smith, he replies with a smile. He arrives at the grocery store and takes a shopping basket. He walks to the baking aisle and looks for cocoa powder. He finds it and puts a box into his basket. Now, vegetable oil, he says. He finds the oil and places a bottle into the basket. Vanilla extract, he reminds himself. He spots the small bottles of vanilla extract and selects one. He thinks for a moment. Maybe I'll get some chocolate chips to add to the cake, he decides. He finds a bag of chocolate chips and adds it to his basket. Frosting, he remembers. He goes to the baking supplies section and chooses a container of chocolate frosting. That should be everything, he says. He walks to the checkout counter. The cashier, a young woman named Emily, smiles at him. Good morning, Mark, she says. Baking something today? Yes, I'm making a chocolate cake, he replies. That sounds delicious, she says. I love chocolate cake. Maybe I'll bring some to share, he says with a grin. She laughs. I'll be looking forward to it. He pays for his items and puts them into a reusable shopping bag. Have a great day, Emily, he says. You too, Mark, she replies. He walks back home, enjoying the warm sunshine. Back at home, he unpacks his groceries and sets everything on the kitchen counter. Time to start baking, he says happily. He preheats the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, about 180 degrees Celsius. He takes out his mixing bowls, measuring cups, and spoons. First, I need to mix the dry ingredients, he says. He measures out the flour. 2 cups of flour, he says, pouring the flour into a large bowl. Next, 2 cups of sugar. He adds sugar to the bowl. 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. He measures carefully. He adds the cocoa powder to the bowl. 1½ teaspoons of baking powder and 1½ teaspoons of baking soda, he says. He adds them to the mixture. A teaspoon of salt, he adds. He uses a whisk to mix all the dry ingredients together. Now for the wet ingredients, he says. In another bowl, he cracks 2 eggs. 1 cup of milk, he adds to the eggs. 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, he pours it in. A teaspoon of vanilla extract, he adds. He uses a hand mixer to beat the wet ingredients until they are well combined. Time to mix everything together, he says. He slowly pours the wet ingredients into the bowl with the dry ingredients. He mixes them together until the batter is smooth. The recipe says to add 1 cup of boiling water, he remembers. He boils water in a kettle. When the water is ready, he carefully measures out 1 cup and pours it into the batter. He stirs the mixture. The batter is thin, but that's how it's supposed to be, he notes. He decides to add the chocolate chips. 1/2 cup of chocolate chips should make it extra chocolatey, he says, folding them into the batter. He takes out 2 round cake pans and greases them with a little oil to prevent sticking. He pours the batter evenly into the 2 pans. He taps the pans lightly on the counter to remove any air bubbles. The oven is ready, he says, checking the temperature. He places the pans into the oven carefully. Now they need to bake for 30 to 35 minutes, he says. He sets a timer for 30 minutes. While the cakes are baking, he cleans up the kitchen. He washes the mixing bowls, measuring cups, and spoons. It's always nice to have a clean kitchen, he says. He decides to make a cup of tea while he waits. He sits at the kitchen table, sipping his tea and looking out the window. His garden looks beautiful with flowers in full bloom. Maybe I can sit outside later, he thinks. After 30 minutes, the timer beeps. He puts on oven mitts and carefully opens the oven door. The cakes smell wonderful, he says. He inserts a toothpick into the center of 1 cake to check if it's done. The toothpick came out clean. They're ready, he confirms. He takes the pans out of the oven and places them on cooling racks. I need to let them cool completely before adding the frosting, he reminds himself. While the cakes cool, he decides to call his sister, Anna. He picks up his phone and dials her number. Hello, Anna answers.
Anna.
It's Mark, he says. Hi, Mark. How are you? She asks. I'm good. I'm baking a chocolate cake today, he tells her. That sounds delicious. I wish I could have a slice, she says. Why don't you come over later? I have plenty, he offers. I'd love to, but I have planned this afternoon, she says. Maybe another time. Sure, no problem, he says. They chat for a few more minutes about family and work. Well, I should go check on my cakes, he says. All right, enjoy your cake, and we'll talk later, she says. Bye, Anna, he says. Bye, Mark, she replies. He hangs up the phone. He checks the cakes. They are still warm. I need to wait a bit longer, he thinks. He decides to read a book while he waits. He goes to his living room and picks up a novel he has been reading. He sits on the sofa and reads for about 20 minutes. After some time, he checks the cakes again. They are cool now, he says. He returns to the kitchen. He carefully runs a knife around the edges of the cake pans to loosen the cakes. He places a plate over the first pan and turns it upside down. The cake slides out onto the plate. Perfect, he says. He does the same with the second cake. Now it's time to frost the cake, he says. He opens the container of chocolate frosting. He places one cake layer on a cake stand. He spreads a generous amount of frosting on top of the first layer. This will make the cake moist and delicious, he says. He places the second cake layer on top of the first. He uses the remaining frosting to cover the top and sides of the cake. He smooths the frosting with a spatula. The cake looks great, he says proudly. He thinks about how to decorate the cake. I have some fresh strawberries in the fridge, he remembers. He takes out the strawberries, washes them, and dries them with a paper towel. He slices the strawberries and arranges them on top of the cake. The red strawberries look nice against the chocolate, he says. He steps back to admire his work. I'm happy with how it turned out, he says. He cuts a small slice to taste. He takes a bite. It's delicious, he exclaims. He decides to share the cake with his neighbors. I can't eat all of this by myself, he says. He cuts a few slices and places them on small plates. He wraps them with plastic wrap. First, he visits Mrs. Johnson next door. He walks over and knocks on her door. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly lady with a warm smile, opens the door. Hello, Mark, she says. What a nice surprise. Hello, Mrs. Johnson. I baked a chocolate cake today and thought you might like a slice, he says, handing her the plate. That's so kind of you. Thank you very much, she says happily. You're welcome. I hope you enjoy it, he says. I'm sure I will. Have a wonderful day, she says. You too, he replies. Next, he goes to Mr. and Mrs. Lee's house across the street. He knocks on their door. Mr. Lee answers. Hello, Mark, he says. How are you? I'm good, thank you. I baked a chocolate cake and wanted to share some with you and Mrs. Lee, Mark says. That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Lee says, accepting the plate. My wife will be delighted. Great. I hope you both enjoy it, Mark says. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? Mr. Lee offers. Thank you, but I have a few more neighbors to visit. Maybe another time, Mark says. All right, have a good day, Mr. Lee says. You too, Mark replies. He continues to share slices of cake with a few more neighbors. Feeling happy, he returns home. He sits down in his garden with a cup of tea and another slice of cake. This has been a wonderful day, he thinks, as he enjoys his cake. He sees a small bird land on the bird feeder he set up in the garden. Hello, little bird, he says softly. The bird chirps and eats some seeds. Mark feels content. Later in the afternoon, his friend James calls him. Hey, Mark, what are you up to? James asks. Hi, James. I baked a chocolate cake today, Mark says. That sounds great. Any chance I could have a slice? James asks jokingly. Of course. Why don't you come over? Mark says. I'd love to. I'll be there in about half an hour, James says. See you then, Mark says. He tidies up the kitchen and prepares some coffee for when James arrives. Soon the doorbell rings. Mark opens the door.
James.
Come in, he says. Thanks, James says, stepping inside. It smells amazing in here. I have coffee ready and, of course, cake, Mark says. They sit at the kitchen table. Mark serves James a generous slice of chocolate cake. James takes a bite. Wow, this is delicious, he exclaims. Glad you like it, Mark says. They chat about work, friends, and plans for the weekend. Are you free tomorrow? James asks. A few of us are going hiking. That sounds fun. Count me in, Mark says. Great. We'll meet at the trailhead at 9 a.m., James says. I'll be there, Mark says. They finish their cake and coffee. Thanks for the cake and coffee, James says as he gets ready to leave. You're welcome. Thanks for stopping by, Mark says. After James leaves, Mark decides to relax for the rest of the evening. He takes a walk around his garden, admiring the flowers. He waters the plants that need it and pulls out a few weeds. As the sun begins to set, he goes back inside. He makes a simple dinner of salad and grilled chicken. After dinner, he washes the dishes and cleans up the kitchen. He sits down to watch a little television. He finds a documentary about nature and enjoys learning about different animals and places. Before going to bed, he checks his phone and sees a message from his sister. Hope your cake turned out great. Send me a picture, Anna writes. He replies, It was delicious. I shared it with neighbors and friends. Here's a photo. He sends her a picture of the cake. Looks amazing. Wish I could have been there, she replies. Next time, he writes. He prepares for bed, brushing his teeth and washing his face. He sets his alarm for 7 a.m. so he can get ready for the hike tomorrow. As he lies in bed, he thinks about the day. Baking the cake was fun, and sharing it made it even better, he thinks. He feels grateful for his friends and neighbors. Today was a good day, he says to himself. He closes his eyes and drifts off to sleep, looking forward to the adventures of tomorrow.